I never thought I'd be standing behind the counter of a dusty, late-night bookstore, staring at the faint glow of the neon open sign, and feel like the world had narrowed to one single heartbeat. But there she was, leaning against the worn mahogany shelves like she belonged to the place, even though she didn't. Claire, my girlfriend's best friend. And somehow, tonight, she looked different. She was rifling through a stack of old poetry books, a small crease between her brows, like she was trying to make sense of a line she already knew. Mid-40s, tall, the kind of presence you didn't notice at first, but once you did, you couldn't look away. Her hair fell in soft waves over one shoulder, a few strands catching the flicker of the lamp above. She had that quiet confidence you notice in people who never feel the need to prove themselves, but it was tempered by something else, something warmer, more fragile. I tried not to stare, but my fingers lingered over the cash register as if my hands could anchor me. She glanced up, caught me watching, and instead of that polite smile I expected, she tilted her head slightly, like she was curious about what I was thinking, curious in a way that felt electric. A flicker of something unspoken passed between us, and I cursed the fact that I wasn't 20 feet taller or 10 years older, so I could just say something. Anything. Can I help you find something? I asked, my voice too loud in the quiet store. She gave me a small, almost imperceptible smile, the kind that made your chest tighten without reason. Maybe, she said, tilting the book in her hands. Or maybe I just like the smell of old pages. I laughed softly, the sound echoing too much in the space, and she laughed with me, but quieter, like she didn't want anyone else to hear. It wasn't the kind of laugh that fills a room. It was the kind that lingers after, the one that makes you think about it long after it's gone. I wanted to reach out, brush a strand of hair from her face, tell her it wasn't fair how much space she took up in my head without even trying. Then she moved closer to the counter, absent-mindedly placing a book down. Our fingers brushed, not on purpose, I swear, but the contact lasted an extra second longer than it should have, and suddenly I could feel the warmth of her hand through mine. My heart slammed in my chest, and I stepped back, too aware, too conscious, too human. You have a knack for picking out the best stuff, I said, hoping it sounded casual. She raised an eyebrow, that sly little curve in her lips, and I could swear she was teasing me. But it didn't matter whether she was or not. I couldn't stop thinking about that glance. She lingered a moment longer, glancing at the books, at me, at the quiet shop around us, like she was weighing something she wasn't ready to say. Then she smiled again, the kind of smile that doesn't belong to anyone else, and walked toward the door. And as she disappeared into the night, I realized I was still staring at the door, feeling like I'd just witnessed something impossible. Like the world had shifted just enough for a single heartbeat to remind me that things would never be the same. I couldn't stop thinking about the brush of her fingers. The following week, I found myself helping Claire move a stack of heavy boxes in her apartment. My girlfriend had called me earlier, mentioning that Claire was reorganizing her living room, and I'd offered, partly out of habit, partly because I couldn't say no. When I arrived, she was already halfway through shifting a bookshelf, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly mussed, looking exhausted but determined. "Thanks for coming," she said, not looking at me, as she adjusted a box. Her tone was polite, careful, almost rehearsed. I noticed the faint tremor in her hands when she lifted the heavier boxes, the way her knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge. I offered to take one, but she shook her head, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear with a quick, distracted motion. "You don't have to do everything yourself," I said softly, trying to sound casual, but my voice caught a little. She paused, and for a second, her shoulders slumped, the rigid confidence slipping just enough for me to see it. She gave a small, almost apologetic smile. "Old habits," she muttered, and I heard the weight behind the words even if she didn't mean me to. We worked side by side in silence for a few minutes. I watched the way she moved, deliberate, careful, precise, like each motion required thought she couldn't spare. Her laugh came suddenly when I misjudged the weight of a box and nearly dropped it, light and fleeting, but it made me catch my breath. The sound hung in the room long after she stopped, like a note vibrating in a quiet space. At one point, she rested her forearms on the top of a tall stack, head tilted, eyes closed for a fraction of a second. I noticed the faint crease at the corner of her eyes, the tiny frown that betrayed her tiredness, the way her fingers flexed over the edge of the box, as though she wasn't sure whether to relax or keep going. "I don't usually ask for help," she said suddenly, almost to herself. Her voice was soft, almost brittle, and for the first time, I felt the pull of something forbidden, something delicate that I wasn't supposed to notice. My hands hovered over the box I was holding, and I swallowed, trying to keep my expression neutral. When she opened her eyes, they met mine just long enough for a spark of something unspoken to pass between us. I could see it there, fleeting, and it made my chest tighten. She glanced away quickly, brushing past me with a quick movement, and I realized I'd been staring. Her shoulder bumped mine lightly, accidental or not, and the faint warmth lingered. We continued working, the silence heavier now, filled with small, charged gestures. Her hand lingered on a book as she set it down. I adjusted a rug, careful not to brush her fingers again, though part of me wanted to. Every tiny motion felt like a conversation neither of us dared to have out loud. By the time the last box was in place, the room had that particular stillness that comes after effort, when exhaustion and relief collide. She sank into a chair, rubbing her temples, and I found myself hovering, unsure whether to leave or linger. "Thanks," she said finally, almost a whisper. Her eyes flicked to mine, and I caught the vulnerability there, soft and fleeting, like a candle flickering in a draft. She didn't ask for more, didn't linger, and yet, somehow, I felt the quiet pull of something impossible stretching between us. I wanted to stay. I wanted to see her smile again, hear her laugh. But all I did was brush my hand against the edge of the table as I passed, feeling the tiniest echo of warmth, and I realized I wouldn't be able to stop thinking about that brush for a long time. It was late, later than I'd meant to stay. Claire had called me over to help with some paperwork she was sorting through at her home office, and one thing led to another. I was still there, watching the rain streak against the window pane, listening to the quiet patter on the roof. The room smelled faintly of old books and her perfume, subtle, grounding, impossible to forget. We were seated side by side at her desk, papers scattered between us, knees brushing every so often. I didn't move away, even though I should have. She glanced at me once, caught my gaze, and then quickly looked down, flipping through a folder like it had all the answers. There was a hesitation in the way her fingers lingered on the papers, a pause in her breath, that made my chest tighten. "I sometimes forget what a mess I make," she said softly, almost to herself. I wanted to tell her it wasn't messy, that it was human, that her hands looked better handling paper than anything else I'd ever seen. But I didn't. I kept my voice measured, casual. "It's fine. I can help." Her laugh was light, nervous, and I noticed the slight tremor in her shoulders. She shifted closer to slide a stack of files toward me, our arms brushing deliberately, or maybe accidentally. Every nerve ending in me screamed, but I stayed still, letting the silence stretch. I wanted to say something reckless, something that could undo the boundaries we'd maintained, but I didn't. A sudden ping broke the tension. She glanced at her phone, then stiffened. I glimpsed the name flashing on the screen. Her ex. She hesitated, thumb hovering, and I saw it, a flicker of frustration, of old, unresolved things. She silenced it quickly and set it face down. The moment vanished, replaced by a tight, careful control she returned to instantly. I watched her breathe, the way her shoulders relaxed just a fraction when she realized the call hadn't forced her hand. My hands itched to reach out, to brush a strand of hair from her face, to say one word I couldn't. But instead, I focused on the paperwork, letting my fingers brush the edge of a folder near hers. Close. Too close. We kept working, the storm outside filling the spaces between our words. Each sigh, each scrape of paper, each fleeting glance felt amplified. I noticed the curve of her jaw, the way her hair slipped over her collarbone when she leaned forward. I noticed her lips pressing together, the tiniest catch in her breath. I wanted to lean in, just a fraction, but stopped myself, aware that everything fragile between us could shatter with a single misstep. Almost done, she murmured, a soft promise or maybe a distraction. I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere, tracing every small gesture, replaying every glance that lingered too long. I could feel her presence in a way that was both comforting and dangerous. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the roof. Her hand brushed mine again, accidental or not, and this time, I didn't pull away immediately. For a heartbeat, it felt like the world had narrowed to us alone, and I should have, crossed the invisible line. But the moment ended. She leaned back, stretching, her chair creaking, and I realized we had both been holding something unsaid, a tension neither of us dared name. My heart was still racing, my mind spinning, and I knew, without saying a word, that tonight had shifted something we couldn't undo. I wanted to lean in. I almost did. We didn't speak for the first 10 minutes after I arrived. Claire was perched on the edge of her sofa, legs crossed, staring out the rain-streaked window. I hovered near the doorway, pretending to examine a shelf, but every so often, my eyes drifted back to her. She noticed, of course, she always noticed, but didn't say anything. Finally, she let out a slow breath, almost a sigh, and I felt it vibrate through the room. Do you ever wonder why things are the way they are? Her voice was quiet, almost fragile. I shift, unsure whether to sit or keep standing, and she didn't guide me either way. What do you mean? I asked cautiously, trying to sound neutral, but my chest felt tight. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned slightly, meeting my gaze. Her eyes were raw, searching, like she was hoping I would read the truth she wasn't ready to voice. I mean us. This, whatever this is. It shouldn't feel like this, and yet, she trailed off, biting the inside of her lip. I took a tentative step closer, hands stuffed in my pockets. Claire, I started, but the words felt heavy. Too heavy for what I wanted to say, and too light for what I felt. She shook her head slightly, almost imperceptibly, a gesture that carried more weight than words ever could. I don't know what I'm doing, she admitted, her voice breaking just enough to make me swallow. I don't know what I want, or what I'm supposed to want, and maybe I'm too late to figure it out anyway. Her vulnerability hit me like a jolt. I wanted to reach for her, to offer comfort, to erase the frustration and fatigue etched into her features. But I stayed where I was, silent, because some things aren't meant to be fixed with words, or even touch. Some things are meant to be felt. We sat in that silence together, the quiet punctuated only by the rain, by the faint hum of the streetlights outside, by the occasional creak of the old floorboards. I noticed the slight tremor in her hands, the way her shoulders tensed and released without thought, the subtle line of exhaustion beneath her eyes. Every detail spoke volumes, louder than any confession. Sometimes, she whispered finally, almost to herself, I think maybe I'm too complicated, or maybe I'm just tired of pretending. Her words lingered between us, heavy, honest, unshielded. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her she wasn't too much, that none of this was her fault. But I didn't. I just nodded, because nodding somehow felt enough in that moment, a quiet acknowledgement that I understood more than she knew. She leaned back against the sofa, a deep exhale escaping her, and for a brief second, I thought she might cry. I didn't move closer, even though every instinct screamed at me to. Some lines, once crossed, can't be uncrossed. Then she met my eyes again, just for a moment, and said, maybe I shouldn't have let you in this far. The words weren't angry or regretful. They were just raw, jagged truth. And somehow, they cut deeper than anything I could have imagined. I swallowed hard, heart pounding, unsure whether to speak or step back. But she had already looked away, letting the room reclaim its quiet. And I realized, sitting there, that nothing between us would ever be simple again. I don't know if I can do this, she said finally, voice so fragile it seemed to shatter the air itself. I had come over that evening to drop off a few boxes of books she'd left at my apartment. The storm had eased, leaving the streets slick and quiet, and her apartment smelled faintly of coffee and old paper, like it always did. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, sorting through a small stack of photographs. "Do you ever think about what you lost?" she asked suddenly, not looking at me. Her voice was calm, but carried a weight that made me pause. I crouched beside her, careful not to crowd her space. "Sometimes," I said quietly. "Why?" She picked up a photo, one I didn't recognize at first. It was faded, edges curled, someone else's laughter frozen in time. She traced the figure with a fingertip, lingering longer than necessary. "This was him," she said. Her voice cracked for a fraction of a second before she regained control. "I loved him, more than I thought I could love anyone." And then, she let the words hang, unfinished, like the memory was too sharp to voice. I didn't speak immediately. I just watched her, noticing the subtle tremor in her hand, the faint catch in her breath, the way her eyes glossed over without tears. I wanted to say something, anything, but I couldn't find the right words. After a moment, I reached out, careful, and touched the corner of the photograph. She flinched slightly, but didn't pull away. "I know loss," I said softly. "And I know that the people we lose, they don't always leave. Sometimes they stay, in the smallest corners of our lives, waiting for us to notice." Her gaze flicked to me, startled. She didn't speak, just held the photo tighter for a second, then set it down on the floor between us. Her hand lingered near mine, inches away, and the air seemed to charge around that small gap. "I wasn't expecting to feel this again," she whispered finally, voice so low I had to lean closer to hear it. "It's like, I thought I'd moved on, but some part of me never did." I nodded, understanding the gravity of her admission. The room felt smaller suddenly, the silence heavier, but not suffocating, just intimate in a way that left my chest tight. She looked away, and I noticed the faint crease forming between her brows, the same one I'd seen the first night at the bookstore, the one that made her seem both confident and achingly human at the same time. "I didn't tell anyone," she continued, voice breaking just a fraction. "Not even her, not even him." She exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the confession settle. "I wanted to say the wrong thing. I wanted to say the right thing. But all I did was move a little closer, careful to respect her space, and place my hand near hers. Not touching, just close enough that the warmth could be felt if she wanted it." Her eyes flicked down at my hand, then back to mine. Something shifted then, almost imperceptibly, a quiet recognition of the invisible thread between us. I could feel her breath hitch, soft and fragile, like a candle about to sway in the wind. "I don't know why I told you that," she murmured, almost ashamed. But I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The room hummed with the unspoken truth. For the first time, she had let someone in, and it wasn't just anyone. And in that stillness, the tiniest tremor ran through me, the realization that everything we'd been avoiding, every glance, every brush of fingers, had just shifted. Something had changed, quietly, irreversibly. Her hand twitched toward mine, then froze. And I knew. The world we'd built in silence had just started to tilt. It was late again, the city lights blurred through her rain-specked window. We were sitting on the couch, side by side but not touching, though neither of us seemed inclined to move away. The stack of books and papers we'd been sorting earlier lay forgotten on the floor, scattered like our conversation had been scattered over weeks. "I guess," she started, voice low, hesitant. "I guess some things can't really be ignored." She didn't finish the sentence, but I knew exactly what she meant. I didn't answer, just shifted slightly, letting the quiet hold us both. Her hand moved, almost accidentally, brushing the edge of mine. I didn't pull away. Instead, I let it linger, the tiniest warmth shared in that brief contact. It wasn't a grand gesture, no fireworks, no confessions. Just two people acknowledging something they could no longer pretend didn't exist. She exhaled, soft and deliberate, and finally leaned back against the couch, shoulders relaxing. I could see the tension ease in the line of her jaw, the way her eyelids fluttered just slightly. I reached out, carefully, and rested my hand near hers, close enough that if she wanted, she could take it. She didn't immediately, but she didn't pull back either. We sat in silence after that, letting the quiet fill the space. No words were necessary. Everything we hadn't said over weeks, the stolen glances, the hesitant touches, the long pauses, seemed to converge in that room. I realized, slowly, that we were both there willingly, choosing to stay in the same small orbit, letting the world outside drift past without notice. She shifted slightly, leaning a fraction closer, just enough that our knees brushed. I caught her eye, and in that look was everything we hadn't dared say: recognition, understanding, the gentle acceptance of an unspoken truth. We didn't need to name it. Naming it would have broken the delicate balance we'd built, the slow accumulation of moments that led here. Her hand twitched again, and this time, lightly, she rested it against mine. The touch was small, almost inconsequential, but it carried the weight of weeks of silent tension. I held it there, not moving, letting the simplicity of the gesture say what words could not. We sat together like that, in quiet companionship, until the streetlights outside shifted and the room grew darker. The storm had passed entirely, leaving only the soft hum of the city beyond the window. "I don't know what comes next," she murmured, almost to herself. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The way we were sitting, the subtle warmth between our hands, the unspoken understanding, it was enough. It was all that mattered. She leaned her forehead very lightly against the top of mine, not demanding, not asking, just allowing the moment to exist. And for the first time, everything felt inevitable and earned, like the quiet culmination of months of hesitation and restraint. I didn't speak. She didn't either. And yet, in that silence, we both understood. Nothing needed to be declared. Nothing needed to be rushed. We stayed there, side by side, hand in hand, letting the stillness speak for us. And for the first time, I felt certain of something I couldn't name, but knew was real. It's been months since that night, and I still think about her sometimes. Not in the frantic, heart-pounding way I used to, but quietly, like a song you catch in the corner of your ear and can't quite forget. Sitting here now, I realize how much changed, not because of any dramatic declaration, but because of the small, deliberate moments we allowed ourselves to share. Claire is different, too. She's lighter in ways I never expected. Her laughter comes more easily. Her eyes have fewer shadows. But she's still her, strong, careful, intelligent, impossible to define in simple words. And that's what made everything feel real. We didn't force anything. We didn't announce it to the world. We just existed in the same space long enough for the quiet to speak. For me, it taught patience. It taught the strange power of restraint, of noticing someone fully without demanding more than they're ready to give. Love, I realized, doesn't always need fireworks. Sometimes, it's just a hand resting near yours, a shared silence, a forehead pressed lightly against another. That's enough. Sometimes, it's everything. Looking back, I can see the line we crossed, not the kind you notice immediately, but the one that changes you regardless. It wasn't dramatic. There were no thunderclaps, no confessions shouted into the rain. Just small gestures, shared vulnerability, and the unspoken understanding that some connections are worth navigating carefully, worth respecting, worth feeling fully. And in that, I learned that love isn't always about certainty. It's about presence. It's about showing up, even when it's complicated, even when it's messy, even when you don't have a roadmap. You feel it in a glance, in a laugh, in a touch that lingers just a second too long. That's where the meaning is. Sometimes, when I catch myself thinking of her, which I still do, I don't feel longing or regret. I feel gratitude. Grateful for the moments, for the hesitation that let us notice each other, for the slow, deliberate collapse of barriers we didn't even know existed. Grateful for knowing that love can be quiet and real, and still seismic in its own way. And as I sit here, remembering the stormy nights, the laughter, the silences, I feel the warmth of what we built, delicate, earned, enduring. It's not a story of perfect endings, because life isn't perfect, but it's a story of what happens when two people notice each other fully, allow themselves to be seen, and choose to stay, even when the world outside insists they shouldn't. Sometimes, that's more than enough. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?